So I'm Chris McKinney. I'm the veterinarian for the Seneca Park Zoo in Rochester, New York.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. So, every other Halloween or so, I tend to do a spooky spectacular, which is my kind of, well, if you can't figure out what a spooky spectacular is, you probably don't deserve to be here. But this is an off year for that. And I will say, I want to take a moment to say that Becca from Greensboro and I had a really cool, really fun little idea for something fun to do for a Halloween episode. But unfortunately, life got in the way. But I am, since it is an off year for the spooky spectacular, determined to do something at least mildly Halloween-y. And so, as you know, we are currently doing a trek through some Texas zoos and aquariums, but I've dressed up Texas as New York. That's right. We are going to Rochester, to the Seneca Park Zoo. And that's not actually, a Halloween treat. I'm just being a goober. But I recorded this episode on Monday, October 28th, and I am dropping it on Tuesday, October 29th. And the reason I'm doing that and the reason I'm moving it ahead is because there is something seasonal about this one. Namely, we're going to talk about those adorable baby pumpkin spice raccoons that currently call the Seneca Park Zoo home. That's right. This year, Seneca Park Zoo is the place where Red Panda Kindergarten is happening. And the stories of the two pandas are pretty sweet and pretty cool, and you're going to get to hear those. But the person I'm speaking to is Chris McKinney, the veterinarian at the zoo. And Chris is a pretty awesome dude. He does a whole lot of really cool stuff at the zoo, and I've gotten to know him for a little bit now. Zoe's been shadowing him, and we hung out at the AAZV conference, and I'm just a really big fan of this guy, and I'm excited to introduce y'all to him. It doesn't hurt that he, takes care of, along with his staff, the Red Panda Kindergarten class. But yeah, it's a cool opportunity to hear about what he does, and I came up with a really fun way to share that with y'all. Namely, I went to the zoo with Zoe today, and I shadowed the shadow. And then we did an interview about it. So you are going to get to hear what my day was yesterday, if you're listening the day this dropped. And you're going to get to hear a true look at what a day in the life of a zoo veterinarian is. Because we had all kinds of different things going on. And we're talking about all different kinds of animals and all different kinds of medical procedures, and it's all really cool and different. I think this might actually be the episode that is the best look at what it really is like to be a zoo veterinarian. And I'm excited to share that along with the Red Panda stuff. So yay! I hope y'all enjoy this one. Before we get to that, really quickly though, I want to remind you all to hit subscribe so you don't miss any moments. Make sure that you are following along on the socials at Rossifari, on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And last but certainly not least, don't forget that you can support the pod by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. For as little as $3 a month, you can help me do what I do here. So with all of that said, it is time to get to my interview with Dr. Chris McKinney of the Seneca Park Zoo. How long have you been here?
Been here as the full-time veterinarian for almost 3 years. I was the backup vet for 4 years before that.
All right. Very cool. So, are you from the area, or was that, did you come here for the job, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from Illinois. I moved out to New York. My wife's from Buffalo, so I moved to New York after vet school. Graduated from the University of Minnesota for that. And originally it was down in the Binghamton area and working with the Binghamton Zoo at Ross Park. Then made my way to Buffalo. And then we actually moved to Rochester because my wife is a zookeeper, and she actually got a position as a keeper here at Seneca Park. I became a veterinarian for a local group of animal hospitals and eventually made my way into being the backup for the zoo.
Nice. Very cool. And so that's a pretty direct shot, and it's cool that so are you and your wife like the power couple of the zoo?
Yeah, so unfortunately she's not currently a keeper. Okay. We have 2 little ones at home, so she left to take care of them. But once they're a little older, she is going to come back and work at the zoo again.
And then you'll be the power couple of the zoo.
Exactly.
Perfect. Awesome. So there's a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about with you, but I kind of just want to talk about our day so far to start, because I have had the privilege of being here with you as Zoe has been shadowing you today. And it's very cool. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is that I know that you have people shadow you. You also have at least one vet student that comes in and does stuff, because I've met her before. So is that something that's important to you? And if so, why? Why is that important in the field in general as well?
Yeah, so I do think it's really important to have not only vet students, but also other veterinarians who are interested in the zoo field. One, from a selfish standpoint, it gives me people to call on as backups. So when I'm out of town, I can have backup vets that cover for me. But I think it's really great to be able to have vets coming in to shadow, just to learn more about the field. They're also, if I have something I'm not quite sure about, I can sometimes pick their brains and make connections for specialists like Zoe working at a specialty hospital that has an MRI and a CT scanner. That's something that I can make use of for our animals if we need those. And for the vet students, I think it's really important. The zoo field is a pretty small field in veterinary medicine, especially compared to the general small animal, large animal clinicians. So I think it's really important to inspire young upcoming veterinarians to work in the zoo field and really show them what it's all about. Because it's not just working with the animals, there's a lot of other things that go on the side. So collaborating with conservation organizations, researchers, a lot of administrative work goes on as part of that. So I think it's really important for them to get to see what happens there and also just learn how to work with these animals, just because a lot of these animals, either we don't know a lot about them yet, or it's just something very different from what the general vet student is going to be exposed to.
No, absolutely. And that doesn't stop when you become a vet. We hung out in Toronto for a whole week because we were all at AAZV's conference together. And I am constantly fascinated by, like you said, how much we don't know, and also how much y'all are able to learn from your peers. I thought it was really interesting just seeing the number of vets that I would see frantically writing stuff down during some of those presentations. And I was mostly just impressed that they understood the words. But I thought that was really cool to see how much y'all learn from each other. What did you get from the conference, and what do you get from the AAZV in general?
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Did you see the Colombian government is spending almost $4 million to relocate Pablo Escobar's hippos?
In Brazil, a school of piranha attacked and injured at least 8 people at a beach resort.
First fatal mountain lion attack in 20 years in California.
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You may have seen me on Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive or Shark Week. So join me and my friends as we break down animal news from around the world and discuss all things wildlife. Click here to unlock these animal mysteries.
Yeah, so AAZV is a great resource. One of the big things I love is that they have a lot of networking, and they actually have a listserv that I am on pretty regularly, where if we have questions or a strange case pops up, we can send out on the listserv and say, hey, I've got this weird thing. Has anyone else seen this? And other people can give input or recommendations. And sometimes that may be that no other people haven't seen this before, but they may have a recommendation on what you could try to do for this unusual illness or growth or whatever change you're seeing. At the conference, it's great because people are presenting research or cases that they've seen just to get that information out there. So we're all learning from each other all the time because there's so many things that are still coming up that are new with some of these animals because they're not like dogs and cats where vets are seeing thousands of them every day and know a lot more about them. These animals, we're still constantly learning, always seeing new things coming up. Like our zoo was unfortunate in that we had a giraffe with squamous cell carcinoma of the jaw type of tumor, and she is the 4th reported case of that. So I'm actually writing that up as a case report that I'll be able to hopefully get into the Journal of Zoo and Wildlife Medicine, and then other people will be able to learn from that. And not only myself, other veterinarians who I consulted with through AAZV are now presenting that information at conferences on giraffe health, on x-rays, because we were able to do x-rays of her jaw. So she's become a very sad case, but a way for other people to learn so that if this happens to other giraffes in the future, we can hopefully learn more and more and hopefully do better with each one that comes up because it's still something we still know so little about.
Yeah, I remember learning about that and kind of, so, I do my weekly zoo news as well. And we covered that because y'all were very transparent from the start and showing photos, like even just on social media and stuff to us lay people, getting to see the shape of the tumor and the size of that giraffe's head, but also, when it was still eating and stuff and how cool that was. And I thought it was very cool and very important that the public got to go on that journey with y'all. And then when it was time to say goodbye, it was not like unexpected. It was not shocking. And we all understood what had gone into it. And I think that was a really smart move by the zoo. I'm a big fan of transparency. So I thought that was, particularly cool.
Cool.
Yeah. So, you were talking a little bit about having to learn from other facilities and having to improvise. And you told us a story about some frogs that you had to, you learned from the Maryland Zoo, maybe a neat way to treat them. And I would love if you could share that story because, man, that is a mental image.
Yeah, so we had a group of young frogs, and we were treating them with ivermectin, which is used for parasite treatment. And it's something that many zoos use. We've used it many times in the past. We're using it same dose, same medication. But for some reason, some of these frogs developed what's called ivermectin toxicity, where they were showing signs of a toxic reaction to the medication. Which we unfortunately didn't find a reason why these specific frogs out of all of them had a reaction. It could have been a genetic predisposition where they didn't process it right, just like there are some dogs that don't do well with that medication. But what I found out looking into it, and it was a recommendation from the Maryland Zoo, was that you can use diluted black tea, actually. So the caffeine counteracts the effects of the ivermectin on the nervous system. So we essentially had a little bowl of dilute black tea, and we were putting these frogs in, so essentially steeping frogs in a bowl of tea. And it actually worked. We actually had a few frogs that, when we tried that, they actually improved and did well.
So I know you've been doing this for a while now, but in those moments as you are, steeping frogs in tea, do you ever stop and say, what is my life? Like, how is this a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, it's one of those jobs where every day is something new, which it's always interesting, exciting, stressful. And there are days where I still, after doing this for a few years, come in and we'll see something. I'm like, how is it that this is my everyday? Like both good and bad.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So let's talk through our day today so far. And I think that's just such a cool way to kind of show the audience, like what you were talking about, how every day is going to be different. Every day is going to have a bunch of weird stuff going on. So when we rolled in this morning, it was time to vaccinate the red panda cubs that you have here. And don't worry, listeners, we will be talking about the red panda kindergarten in great detail. I know you all want to hear it, but so that was the start of the day. And so just kind of talk through how that went, yeah.
Yep. So in the morning, we have my technician and a keeper feed them, and then once they've been fed, they've had some time to run around and get their energy out. They get the zoomies in the morning after they eat.
Their energy was not out. I'm not sure those two ever get their energy out.
Yeah, they still had enough to flip over the cat tree that they use. So yeah, we were able to get them out, and the vaccination went very well. So they're vaccinated for rabies and canine distemper, which are two diseases that, unfortunately, wild red pandas have a lot of problems with, and we know they're prone to. But yeah, they did very well for their vaccines. We monitor them through the day, make sure they don't have any negative reaction, which they haven't had. But then putting them back in their area after the vaccines, like they just spin around and try to push their way right back out. So it's a battle to get them to stay in their room. But yeah, they're a lot of fun.
They're a lot of fun, but it's really funny too to watch. Like, and I think this is such a, I don't know. I think it's a thing that a lot of people don't think of when they think of like being a zoo vet, but literally, like you said, you have to just get them in that space. And they just want to run around and be goobers, right? Mm-hmm. And it was so funny watching, the vet of this zoo literally trying to close a door with one hand while using your other hand to try to push back two red panda faces. And these noses just kept popping out. At one point, a little paw came out. And at one point, you completely folded and they both burst out into the room. And obviously, it's like a very secure room and everything. But like, I don't know. It's just really funny to me and really, in a good way, it's like a humanizing thing, too, to see like having to fight with in a silly, fun way, these red pandas to get them back into. I'm like, this is this like brilliant zoo vet guy who's doing the thing and can't quite get the pandas into the room. I will point out that, as is often the case with vet techs, your vet tech did a much better job of actually making it happen. Just saying.
Yes. Yeah, the techs are always a very important part of everything, and sometimes much better on the practical end of things.
Yes. So then after that, where did we go? I'm even trying to remember.
I'm trying to remember. After that, I believe it was
That's right. It was education next.
Yes, the education area.
So you introduced us to the whole collection, which was very cool. But in particular, we were going to check something out. And this was something that you didn't know about until I think yesterday, right? Yeah. And a keeper was just like, hey, I noticed a thing. And so you wanted to look at it. So, talk about that.
Yeah, and that's where it's really important. The keepers are kind of my eyes and ears out in the zoo. They're the ones with these animals. They know what they're eating, when they're eating, their normal activities and habits, so they do a daily report. And if it's something major, they'll let me know right away. Obviously, more minor things, they'll put it on the report, which I read that evening or in the morning before work each day. So I know who kind of creates my schedule for the day of what I'm looking at. So this particular one was our old Senegal parrot. She's 32 years old, one of the oldest in any zoo right now. So she's actually technically retired from zoo programs. So she used to go out and do the zoo mobile, educational programs, and now she just gets to hang out with us and do her thing. But she had developed just some red spots on her feet, which can be an early sign of bumblefoot, which is a foot infection that they'll get. So they needed to go and check on those. And trying to get her out. She's got a little hiding place in the corner. She wedged herself in.
That was really funny.
I tried to get her out. Ended up having to have the keeper come get her out for me. They usually sometimes respond better to the keepers. But once she was out of the cage, she was fine. Let me pick her up and check everything out. Got to look at her feet. They're not too bad, so we're going to keep a close eye on them. She's a sweet bird, but she gets bitey coming in and out of her cage sometimes, which is where the keepers usually know best on how to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, there's nothing at all even remotely related to each other between vaccinating a red panda and looking for potential bumblefoot on a bird. And I want to point that out because, again, it's just kind of the amazing thing about, what's done here. And so then from there, we went to...
So after that, we went up and drew blood on our lioness, one of the female
total
lions.
Normal day. Total normal day, yes. And the lioness is trained to participate in her own healthcare. And so we actually got to see that, which was incredible. Just being around a cat that size is so impressive. But so talk through that procedure as well.
Yeah, so she is trained for that. So she'll come up. We've got a little offshoot of the enclosure. It's called a squeeze cage, which is a term because you can move the walls in and out and squeeze the animal, although we don't do that just because it's stressful for them, and she does fine without having to do that. So she walks into that and just swings her tail out, and a keeper sits up by her head, feeds her meat through the bars there. So she's eating. We're able to take her tail out and draw blood. They've got these veins that run along the sides of the tail, and we can draw blood from that. She knows we're doing it. She'll sometimes stop eating and kind of glance back like, hey, what are you doing back there? And then, oh, yeah, it's just you guys, and keeps eating. Like, she really doesn't seem to care, so she is very willing to allow us to do that. Our other female lion, not so much. We've tried seeing if she would do that, and the minute anything touches her tail, she's like, nope, I'm done, and walks away. So we don't force them to do that. If we happen to have them sedated for something, we would draw blood, but outside of that, if she chooses to let us draw the blood, then we do it. We were able to get a blood sample, and we're able to use that to do general health monitoring, and she's doing well.
That's good. Now, in this case, obviously I know it's more the keepers that do the day-to-day training stuff. But how involved do you or your tech have to be to, in that process as you're training for a voluntary blood draw? Because you were not only drawing the blood, but literally you were holding the tail, and it was very cool, all outside of the cage, of course. But it was very cool to see.
Yeah, and the training, the keepers will start that. They'll train them to go to the right area, sit in the right spot for us, and sit while they get food. And then we'll start the process by just myself and the technician will come and hold the tail, get them used to that, just that feeling. And then we'll take a blunted needle where it's just a round tip so it's not sharp, and just kind of poke at her tail with that. And then once she lets us do that, then we'll have a few sessions where we just use that blunt needle so that we're not actually sticking it in there. Make sure that she's not going to react negatively. And then once she's gone through that a few times, she's not having a bad reaction, then we move up to the actual blood draw where we actually draw the blood. And she actually did pretty quickly. She learned to do that. She's probably the calmest lion I've ever worked with. And she actually adjusted to that really well.
That's really cool. Do you ever put in, I know that you're part of the training in the sense of that you're there doing that part of it, but do you ever do any training in your position, or is that left entirely up to the keepers and you're just there to facilitate the medical side of it?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much just there to facilitate the medical side. So the keepers will do all the training. I just step in when it's like a blood draw. We also have a sea lion that we can draw blood from her back flippers, and that's where I step in to hold the flipper and poke at it with a fake needle until she's used to it, or if we're training an animal for laser therapy, for arthritis, I'll just come down just to be, so they're used to having me stand there and get used to that. So yeah, I'm more just there to acclimate them to the medical aspect of it.
Makes sense. And, you mentioned laser therapy, and that's a thing that y'all are doing here for a lot of animals right now.
Yep.
Is that a relatively new treatment, and what effects are you seeing from it?
Yeah, so it's probably been around a few years in veterinary medicine. A lot of small animal hospitals, especially, have been using it for some time already. Newer, I'd say, using it in zoo medicine, partly because it does take a lot of training because they have to sit still for a while. And also now we have much smaller, more portable lasers, whereas they used to be pretty big, clunky machines that you'd have to wheel around. And so, yeah, we use it in a lot of older animals for arthritis. It can also accelerate wound healing. So the laser light is absorbed by cells. It stimulates cell growth and gets more blood flow to the area. So it has been shown to actually, you can't use it if there's a tumor. It's been shown to actually increase growth of tumors because you're getting that increased cell multiplication and increased blood flow. So there's one caution area we always have to look at. But we've seen good results with it, using it for arthritis. So especially our tiger, Katya, she's 19 years old, has arthritis in her hips and her shoulders. And they actually were seeing where she had a noticeable limp. We started on some pain medications, started the laser therapy, and it takes some time for it to really take effect. But after a few weeks, they saw a very obvious change in how she was moving. The limp went away. They were seeing her be more active. She's getting up on her higher areas more easily. So you can see a definite change. And she herself, you can see when she sees me come with that laser, she'll trot right up and get right in position, and she's ready to go.
That's really cool. Yeah. Whenever a vet talks about laser therapy, I just picture like a alien gun, like in some bad movie, like a laser gun type thing. And I know that's not what it is. I've actually seen the devices used, but I'm guessing I'm not the only person who thinks that. So for the people that are listening, can you explain like what laser therapy actually looks like for an animal?
Yep. And so the technical term that they use to probably try to get rid of that imagery is photobiomodulation. Ooh. That huge word that most people have no idea what it means. But essentially the frequency of the light actually has a biological effect on the cells. So what we do, our laser unit, it's a little handheld unit, probably about maybe a foot long, and then it's got a disc on the end that emits the laser light. So essentially what we do, the animal comes as close as we can get them. So they're basically right up against the fencing that we use, and I'll hold it up against the area we're treating. And it does this little pulse of red light into the area. So there's no like concentrated laser beam. It's more just this diffuse red light that's pulsing out. And then we move that over the area that we want to affect, and basically just continuously pulses that laser light. And it has settings, so it's emitting it at a very particular frequency for a particular amount of time, depending on what we're treating.
Gotcha. Very important question. Does it say pew, pew, pew?
I wish it did.
I want it to say pew, pew, pew. If I was a vet, I would sit there and go pew, pew, which is why, by the way, I am not a vet. One of many reasons. But that's really fascinating. It's like, so you said that it's dialed in, like you have to dial in a specific, frequency and such. Based on what you're treating, is it animal and disease treatment or is it like all animals get arthritis set to 6 pew pew pews per second or whatever it is?
Yeah, so it does ours. It has equine, which I use for generally any larger animal, and then a small animal setting, which is anything the size of a domestic dog or smaller. And then it has different settings within that, so we can fine tune it. So like for the arthritis, it has different settings. There's inflammation, there's maintenance, I honestly can't remember what the third setting is. But especially for any animal that has a really dense hair coat, we're going to use, even if they don't have active inflammation, we use that setting because it's a little bit more of an intense laser light. So it's going to help get through that thick hair coat. So we do fine tune it to some degree depending on the hair coat of the animal and the size.
Okay, that's really cool. It's fascinating how much stuff you have to think about when you're treating one disease, something like arthritis, which is very common in older animals, including humans, but for all different species, and to account for not only weights and not only metabolisms, but fur density and stuff like that. It's got to constantly keep you on your toes.
Definitely, and it is different for every species. So even going between different species with medications, there are certain medications that may be toxic to one species and use that low dose for this species, but a high dose for that species. So the doses vary. What medications the animals can even have varies. So that's why I have some of it committed to memory, but I also have a lot of reference books, journals, and like I said, the AAZV listserv will sometimes be like, you can be like, hey, I can't find a dose for this particular species. Has anyone ever used this medication in this species? And sometimes if we can't find one, you have to be like, well, it's related to this other animal that we do have a dose for. So let's try that medication at the dose we'd use in this closely related species.
Yeah, that's that always fascinates me. I just feel like we should know more. And I know that we're working on it, and I get why. Like, I'm not saying that as like a we're failing thing, but it's just like, wow, like the winging it when you have to is just the improvisational side of vet med is so cool. And so then, okay, so after we left lioness blood drop, total normal thing to hang out and see, we headed to the polar bear and sea lion behind the scenes area. And honestly, I don't even know why we were there because I was just wandering around looking at all the polar bear and sea lion stuff. So why were we there?
Yeah, so that was just we were dropping off some new medications for our polar bear and our sea lions. They get some regular medications. So we were just dropping off refills for their medications, essentially. So we have one sea lion. He's has a little bit of anxiety, so he's on. It's not a medication; it's actually a supplement made for dogs, but it actually works very well in sea lions as well. So he gets that. So we were dropping off. So we're slowly decreasing the dose. He seems like he's doing really well with the anxiety. Nice. So doing a little bit less of his supplement. Hopefully, continue to see good effect, but we can always go back up. And being a supplement, for the most part, supplements are safe, but you can get, especially in certain animals, even a vitamin supplement can have bad effects if there's too much of or too little of that vitamin. So we do have to be careful when going between different species, but we know this is very safe in sea lions, so we can adjust the medication pretty easily. So yeah, we were just dropping that off essentially and checking in with the keepers there, see how is everyone doing? How are all the sea lions acting? What's the polar bear up to today? So kind of just getting the general update.
And that's actually been a big part of most of the stops. Like when we were in education, we were there to see one bird. Mm-hmm. But you talked about all kinds of the different animals there, and we're asking all kinds of questions, and keepers had noticed little things. And it was like, it felt to me like in some ways they were like preparing you like, hey, this might be a thing. Like, we don't know yet, but we're keeping an eye on this for you, which I thought was very cool. And, it was the same in the pinniped and polar bear area. And, I think that's very cool. And it seems like just communication with the staff is a large part of when you're doing rounds, what's happening.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge part. It's just like working at a clinic where you've got the owners of the animals. The keepers serve that same role where they're the ones who really know these animals. So, I try to regularly touch base with everyone, and a lot of communication back and forth with the zookeepers and the curators. They really are an essential part of making sure that these animals all stay healthy.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the zookeepers are actually significantly more informed than the average pet owner when they go to the vet. But,
yes, very true.
That's just my opinion, not the opinion of anyone else who may be here. And so, and then we went to River's Edge, right?
Yep.
Creatures of the River's Edge.
Yeah.
And what were we specifically there to see? Like, we went back in the back and we saw the cool off-exhibit animals, and I was distracted by the geckos, especially the day gecko, because I love them. But what was our purpose for being there?
Yeah, and main thing was the geckos. So we've got the off-exhibit area, which are animals that we keep, but they're not out in exhibits where people can see them. So the one is a day gecko who had an injury on her side. She's just kind of in a separate area to allow that to heal. We had a bandage on her for a bit.
How do you bandage a day gecko?
Excellent question. So a lot of time and tape.
Fair.
So it's a tape that sticks well but doesn't rip their scales off when you pull it off. So it is a very specific medical tape. And then it's called vet wrap, which is essentially the stretchy, colorful stuff that is used on a lot of dog-cat bandages. We kind of wrap her up like a little sausage in that. And then when she first has it on, she looks like her legs are broken and just lays there splayed out like, what am I supposed to do? I'm wrapped up. And then she realizes that it's fine and went on with her normal daily routine.
That's really cool.
And then we had a leaf-tail gecko who had a little something on his snout. I don't know if he scraped it, but he had a little sore there. So we were keeping him to monitor that, just make sure it didn't turn into anything worse. And he's doing well, so he'll probably go back out into the habitat with the other geckos soon.
Nice, yeah. And so, again, as we talk through all of this, I mean, the crazy part of this is that none of these species have, like, anything to do with each other at all. It's such a crazy, ridiculous day. And we rolled in around 8:30, and it's 11:30 now. And you did all of that and are recording a podcast. And then, after this, we're going to go down to Giraffe to do some desensitization for again, participating in their own medical treatment.
Yep.
And then you have a meeting with Safe Red Panda later for an initiative that they're looking at, right? So, like, all in a day's work, right? And you have two vets shadowing you, and you've got me following along like a little happy puppy. And yeah, it's that's just because it's a Monday, right?
Yeah. Living the dream.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Now, as I mentioned, we do have to go into a little bit of detail on Red Panda Kindergarten because I will get yelled at if we don't. So y'all had a red panda come, and I think that entire story you just need to share because it's a good one and you experienced it.
Yeah. So we have our male and female, Willie and Raji. We knew they'd been breeding. We weren't quite sure if she was pregnant. She's a very shy panda. She doesn't allow ultrasound, really doesn't do well with exams either. And one day she finally came down. I was offering her some apples and grapes, and she's like, I'll let you look at me. So I'm feeling her belly over, doing all the exam things that I would. They're fun because I can do just like a dog or a cat. I can just look everything over and they sit there as long as they've got fruit. And I was like, oh, she is pregnant. And 3 days later, we had a baby red panda. We had been prepping with the expectation she was pregnant. So we were ready. It wasn't that it was more confirmation that I was able to provide.
And actually, let me pause you there for 1 second. But that you've told me a couple times now that, like, when you're unsure of something, you're always you always go the extra mile to prepare. And then if not, okay, at least, you were ready, right? Is that your general take on things? Like, if there's a possibility of something, prep for it? Yeah,
in general, we'll prep. If we're not sure, we'll prep with the expectation that it's going to be really whatever we need to be prepped for, so that we're always ready. And the worst that happens is, oh, she wasn't pregnant. We have to kind of clear out her nest box and everything. But yeah, we always want to be ready. If there's anything we're not sure about, we want to be ready for worst or best case scenario, depending on what's going on. With pregnancies, we always want to be ready for babies to show up.
So back to this baby. Tell me.
Yeah,
tell me
so
more.
we're all set. So she had the baby. She's taking great care of it for the first 2 days. Perfect. We were very happy. And then we don't know what happened, but on that third day, she picked up the baby, moved it around a few times, and then just completely ignored it after that. So we go in, we get the baby. He was a little chilly. We warmed him up, got some food into him. So when we're feeding a red panda baby, we actually use Esbalac, which is a puppy milk replacer. It's just diluted to very specific dilutions. And it basically make it as close to red panda milk as we can. We knew that he had gotten colostrum from the mom, which is that first milk they get that's loaded with antibodies and the stuff they need. That's what they get in the first 24 hours. So the fact she had him for that initial 2 days is very important. And we fed him, put him back out there, watched in the hopes that she would come back and re-accept him. But she actually got very upset with us. She vocalized, they make these little squeaking sounds, and she ran away, wanted nothing to do with him. So we were like, she's not going to take care of him. So at that point, we considered him abandoned. So we took him in. Initially, he was in an incubator to keep him nice and warm. At first, their eyes are closed. Their ears are actually closed down. They can't hear. They can't see. So he was in a little incubator.
That's when I first saw him. So cute.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, tiny little thing at that point. It fits in the palm of your hand. And those first few days, they actually have to be tube fed. They don't suckle well from a bottle. So you actually put a tube into their stomach and put the milk in that way. And then eventually they learn how to suckle from a bottle. And eventually they grow too big for the incubator. So we moved him to a little playpen that we had in our surgery prep area. And people could watch through the windows of our vet hospital. And then eventually he got too big for that. So now he has his own big room in the back of the hospital, and we have cameras so people can see him, but people can't see him directly. And the SSP, they don't like to have single red pandas. They like them to be able to socialize and learn that they're what red pandas do. So we actually got a second red panda. She's a different species. She's the Allurus styani, whereas he's Allurus fulgens. So they're two different species, but still both red panda. So she got brought to us by one of the employees from the zoo she was at. And they have been growing up together, doing very well. We're now at the point where we're starting to wean them. It's a very drawn-out process with red pandas. We spoon feed them mushed up red biscuits that they eat. They get bamboo that they munch on here and there, but they're mostly bottle-fed still. And they are wild little ones. They love to climb now. They're very good climbers. They will try to climb us when we're trying to feed them. They get the zoomies and will run around. They have an outdoor area, so when it's warm enough, they can spend some time outside. So they're doing very well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love Red Panda Kindergarten. I love that it's a thing that they do every year now with some of the singlets. Obviously, for those of you listening, we spent a lot of time at Greensboro last year with that, and now I'm here hanging out with them again at Seneca Park Zoo, and it's been pretty fantastic. One thing that really amused me was that when we first started talking about this, nobody had used the phrase Red Panda Kindergarten with y'all, even though that is what has been used the last couple of years and like what Sarah Glass at the SSP calls it. So I take pride in being able to educate you guys on that. That was very important to me.
Definitely.
But it's been really cool to see that and to see them grow together and have that kind of sibling relationship, even though they're not actually siblings. So that's very cool. And your male has a very special name. So do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so his name is Teddy Graham. The Graham is for actually my son, who's Graham. So it was the day that he was abandoned it was a Saturday, actually, my son's birthday. So I was at his birthday party. I get the call from the zoo that this had happened. So I was like, oh, sorry, buddy, but I have to go to the zoo. So I come in and I ended up spending the entire day here because we had to figure out the tube feeding him and figure out what the incubator and what we're going to do to keep him here and what we need to do going forward, getting the feeding plans all ready, which we had kind of, again, planning for worst or best case scenario. We had already started a plan for if he was abandoned, what do we do? So we already had a lot of that started. So it was really just finalizing all of that and putting it into action. But I ended up missing most of his birthday. And I happened to mention that to the assistant curator of the carnivore section, which is where the red pandas are. And she was like, well, why don't we name him Graham? And one of my technicians has a baby son named Teddy. And I was thinking like the snack, Teddy Grahams. And I was like, oh, we could combine them and make it Teddy Graham. And that stuck.
I really like it. It's a great name. Cool. So we are almost out of time because we have to go do drafts. So real quick, any conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to?
Let's see. Probably trying to think of a specific one.
I warned him. I totally warned him.
Yeah, and now I'm blanking. I had one in mind. I'd say probably Snow Leopard Trust. We've worked with them for quite a while as a zoo, and I know they do a lot of great work, and they'll send us videos from their camera traps where they've sighted snow leopards. And red pandas, I will admit, are my favorite animals. After that is cats in general. I own 4 cats, and I love cats of all types. And we have snow leopards here. So that's a really big one. And I think they do a great job with trying to conserve snow leopards.
Absolutely. Very cool. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tail left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
All right, so I'm trying to think of a good one.
As you think, I'll just point out that you literally got pooped on today while I was here watching. Yeah, it was just minor poop. It's not worthy of the title, but it was very entertaining.
Yeah, it probably is with the red panda babies. They produce a lot of poop. And we had the one day when they were little, like they're first starting on the formula, just like human babies, when if they're transitioning to a formula, they get some runny stool. So I ended up having one of the babies poop all over my arm, then stood up and realized that I had been sitting on red panda poop and had it all down my backside.
Oh no!
So I pick up the red panda to put him down, and he poops more all down the front of my pants. So I now have poop down my arm, my leg, the back of my pants. It was a lot of poop. My wife was not happy when I got home and showed her my pants, which had orangish brown streaks everywhere.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so there you have it, folks. Red Panda Kindergarten 2024 and Dr. Chris McKinney and just all the good things. I have to tell you that, first of all, it is so much fun spending time with the panda cubs. They are ridiculous and growing so fast, and they are so cute. But honestly, the most breathtaking thing about this, everything that you just heard in this episode, is 100% sitting and watching a lion voluntarily chill out while blood is drawn from her tail. First of all, lions are really big. Like, I know that there are a lot of exhibits, even at Seneca Park Zoo, you can be inches away from a lion because of how they have the glass and stuff. But there's something about just, I don't know, being in their space and seeing them up close. It's
wow, it's breathtaking. And then to watch them be completely unconcerned as they get poked with needles it's pretty darn impressive. The teamwork between the veterinary staff and the keeper staff at that zoo really impressed me all day today. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that one as much as I enjoyed doing it. And I don't really have anything else to say about this one. So hey, make sure that you are back on Friday for Zoo News. And again, don't forget that you can support the pod by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. And if you join the highest tier, you'll get to hear your name at the end of the episode like this. I'd like to thank my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And with all that said, don't forget, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.